And thank you very much for coming out and joining us.
I'm audio recording, just so everybody knows.
Now that I'm not sure of.
Is it a public meeting?
No, I understand that. I'm trying to draw the distinction between audio and video. You usually have to get a waiver.
No, I just have to tell you, under state law, I just have to tell you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if I'm addressing something, we're going to take questions at the end, but one of the things that Catherine was stressing is that we really cannot have this be a meeting where people are sort of yelling things out. So I'm thinking about what she just said, and I am just making sure. So I'm thinking, I'm not saying anything, I'm making sure that it's okay to do that, because I know I've been in other, I was just at one in Brockton, and they had to have, not for us, I went there for someone else's, and there were waivers there because they were videotaping it. It wasn't an audio tape situation. And that was a public meeting too. So that's the only reason why I paused, is because I remembered a recent experience, and I don't know the rule on whether or not you have to ask people, but I'm at least raising the issue.
Under state law, I have to tell people, right?
Yeah, I understand. It gave me pause, so I spoke about it out loud.
I don't think we're going to riot on you.
No, I'm not worried about that at all. And in fact, in this particular group, that's probably the least of our, with the backgrounds of this group, I think that's probably the least of our worries. No, it's fine. I just wanted to think it through. That's all.
Thank you. Now we're going to turn to the site. 1089 Washington Street is located at the corner of Washington and Cross Streets, 0.9 miles from Garden Remedies, which is greater than the half-mile buffer that's required under the ordinance. To the west is Trader Joe's. To the east is Mattress Firm. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to talk about the changes to the building and the site.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to go ahead and flip these depictions around. I know you should be able to see up at the screen there, but thank you, Gene. Just in case people are sitting a little bit closer, you might be able to see it better on the side. My name is Matthew Skelly. I'm a civil engineer with Fuss & O'Neill, and we are the engineers on this project. I want to first start out by orienting you to the existing property. So we've got this up on the site on the screen here. You can see Washington Street kind of at the bottom of this screen, which runs primarily east-west. Cross Street on the left of the screen here, which runs primarily north-south. And this is the existing building. One thing I do want to call your attention to, this is a slightly out-of-date aerial image. Today, all of this landscaping has been removed, all prior to this team's interaction with the site. All of that is gone now, so it's a less interesting thing to look at, I'd say, at this point. Right now, the lot is striped for 32 parking spaces. We're proposing 28 parking spaces on site, potentially 27, which is our zoning requirement. The building right now is a 8,580 square foot building. We're proposing 5,000, just under 5,000 square feet to be used for the dispensary, and the rest to remain vacant. There are driveways existing, an entrance to the site from Washington Street, and an exit onto Cross Street that is just out of the frame there. The site has a bus stop right out in front of it on Washington Street. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. Great, so here are our proposed conditions. And I just will say before we get into this too deeply, this is still draft. This is not, we've not submitted this yet, but this is where we are at in the process with our design. So we're proposing to reconfigure the parking lot to reduce the impervious area, bring back some of this landscaping, add a little bit more along the side here. Right now we're showing a total of 28 parking spaces.
gonna interrupt you. I see you taking a picture, sir, and I just wanna emphasize this is not the final site plan that's gonna be submitted to the city. This is an interim draft conceptual plan. And while I've got you interrupted, I'd like to pass around a sign-in sheet for those of you who are here. Put your name and address, please.
All right, so as I was mentioning, 28 spaces currently proposed. The regulations require 1 space per every 300 square feet of retail use, plus 1 space for every 3 employees. That gives us a total of 27 spaces required. I'll mention now, I guess, that employees will be encouraged to park off-site to provide more parking in the parking lot for patrons. And employees will also be given Charlie cards and encouraged to use alternate modes of transportation when possible.
When you say off-site, where's off-site?
We're gonna do the questions at the end.
Hold the questions. So we're proposing new parking islands. We're trying to, this'll bring the parking lot closer up to code. We're proposing security fencing along this eastern portion of the site and screening fencing along the northern portion of the site. The driveways are proposed to remain in the same general location that they are now, as you can see. We're maintaining the flow pattern more or less that's out there today. And we're narrowing the Washington Street access to provide a little bit of a tighter driveway, less distance for people to cross while they're walking on the sidewalk. And we're proposing to change the configuration of the cross street driveway to really enforce that no right turn restriction and make sure everyone is turning left out onto Washington Street, not driving through the neighborhood. The last thing about the driveways, this eastern driveway here will have a gate. That's where deliveries are going to be. That's where the dumpster is going to be located as well. Circulation. This is something that we've put a lot of thought into. And we've looked at a number of different options. We've looked at the option that would remove the cross street access and have one kind of in and out access onto Washington Street, kind of in the middle more of the parcel. My batteries here. So kind of where the bus stop is located now. There are pros and cons to that, but it does not allow the same number of parking spaces on site and would not allow us to meet our requirement for that. We've also looked at the option of having separate in and out driveways on Washington Street. Again, that doesn't allow us to meet our required parking minimum, and we find both of those to be less safe for the general public. Right now, not allowing vehicles to turn out onto Washington Street from this location helps to consolidate the access points onto Washington Street, where you have faster moving vehicles and the potential for more serious collisions. The other benefit of this proposal is that we are really restricting access. It's a very narrow road, cross street, as I'm sure you're all aware. It will be very difficult to make a right turn out of that driveway the way it's currently configured, meaning almost no one will be driving through the neighborhood north of the site. Were the driveway configuration to just allow people to leave here, it would not prevent anyone from driving up through the cross street neighborhood.
Will block us. Well, I just want to add in one more. October 2.
The way that we're trying to do this is to let us,
Okay, I got it.
we'd like to make our presentation and we will have questions and answers at the end.
Because we're right across the street. That's impacting.
I know, we sat with you, and we sat with you just a couple of weeks ago.
I understand.
And I spoke with you at length then.
Okay. Just a couple more things here. So, from the traffic analysis perspective, just a couple high points to mention. So, as we spoke about the bus stop, there's really good transit access. The number 553 and 554 buses run on Washington Street. There's adequate sight distance, both turning onto Cross Street and from Cross Street onto Washington Street, which we would be sure to maintain with any new landscaping. We studied the most recent 3 years of available crash data and found that there were 6 crashes reported at this intersection, which for the volume of traffic there is no abnormal frequency or type of crashes. And there are, so I wanted to give you some perspective to compare this to what was out there previously. So the athletic center was out there previously. The proposed facility is a more heavy generator than the athletic facility, but there are trade-offs, right? Because people will generally be coming to this site, stopping to stay for, you know, somewhere in the realm of 15 to 20 minutes on average. Would you say, Andrea, that's?
Yeah, if not less, if it's someone who's ordered online and it's just picking up, then they'll be in and out in a less period of time, in a shorter period of time.
So while there are more trips, these cars dwell on site for a shorter amount of time than what you would see at the athletic center. And that means a much smaller buildup. I also wanted to give you perspective compared to the Trader Joe's. The Trader Joe's generates during the afternoon peak hour, which is kind of the most critical period, nearly twice as many trips as the proposed dispensary would. Last thing for this is the landscaping. I'll say that this is, again, I'll emphasize this is our first run with the landscaping, but some key points to highlight. We're proposing street trees along Washington Street that would match the existing ones that are out there. We would be looking to add some flowering trees also to promote some visual interest along the side of the parking lot and also to screen the lot. These are all going to be hardy, salt tolerant, and native shrubs that are planted on site here. Any of these are going to be native to the area that we would find here normally. Also, I want to point out there's the option, you see some of this blue highlighting here. This would be options for potential stormwater retention to help reduce the impact further of stormwater. Around the building, we're proposing some foundation planting. In the rear of the building, we're proposing some trees to screen from the properties to the rear. And interior, we're proposing some larger trees, again, to help bring it up to zoning code.
Yeah, I
You
do.
want to jump in? Yeah.
So there are a couple of things. First, with regard to the landscaping, we have met with abutters on the landscaping. We've actually engaged Lisa Gersbach, who's a local landscape designer, and asked her specifically to look into LID, which is low impact development. What I'm hoping to do in this parking lot is not just get a measure of landscaping that the neighbors want and screening that the neighbors want, but I'm looking for something that's going to be environmentally beneficial. So we're talking about a number of different things, permeable pavers, the use of bioswale, plants whose roots can filter out pollutants from stormwater. There are a number of different options, and a lot of them are very, very attractive. That said, what the abutters want is very important to us, and so there are lots of options around that. People who simply want a fence and don't want necessarily trees on the other side of it. There are low shrubs that can be used, and that is fine. The regulations do not require us to fence in Washington Street or Cross Street, although we have heard from the neighbor that's specifically across that he would like a fence there. So I say all of that to say, this was our pass at it, but this is by no means what it will look like at the end, because we are actively engaging with the immediate abutters as to what they would like. We're mindful of the regulations, and we're also using a landscape designer that's going to push us toward a more environmentally healthy parking lot that's not just sort of black asphalt. That's the first thing. The second thing is the Cross Street exit. Now, that was an existing exit when we got there. The reason, so unsurprisingly, when we built this out, we built it out keeping the exit. We have met with neighbors. Every single person on this, at this table has been on Cross Street. I will say for myself, I won't speak for anybody else, it is truly one of the most remarkably narrow streets I've ever seen. I cannot believe that there is traffic in two directions and parking apparently on one side of it. I understand, and I've heard loud and clear how people feel about the exit onto Cross Street. What we have said to neighbors is, we are dealing with an existing exit. Ultimately, we have no problem presenting all of the options to the city. The city will make a decision on whether or not an entrance and an exit on Washington Street meets public safety needs. That is not our call. Once they tell us what is acceptable and what is not acceptable to them, it is up to us to either do it or not do it, and not get a permit. But we are not adverse at all to the city fully considering, and this includes involving the neighbors in this conversation, the abutters in the conversation, considering the very good reasons, I'll just be perfectly honest, the very good reasons why folks who live on Cross Street don't want any more traffic on Cross Street. That said, if there is an entrance and an exit on Washington Street, there is literally nothing to stop people from parking on Cross Street anyway. And there's nothing to stop people sort of traversing the neighborhood. Not only are we proposing that the curb cut pinch all of the traffic to the left, we are willing to take one of the parking spaces and put a parking attendant there in a booth with cameras on the booth, making sure that no one does anything. None of our customers do anything except take a left. It's less than half a block to Washington Street, so it's not a very long distance to the end of the street. If you live across the street, I understand that still is not acceptable to you. But we're willing to sort of enforce it as well because we do understand. And as I say, that said, the city says, on balance, we don't think that it's going to be a problem. Then we'll do the entrance and the exit on Washington Street. We will abide by what the city asks us to do.
Can I say something? Because your exit is just opposite or driveway. You know, that's special situation. It's not like we are not have anything. We just live on the cross street. But your exit street right at our driveway.
Right facing each other, right.
That's directly across the street.
Right.
Where, yeah, and it has always been there. It is not our exit. It has always been there.
Like that,
Not necessarily.
but
Well, it certainly was there from the previous owner.
Yes,
I don't
you are right,
necessarily go
but
back in history.
that situation, we don't have many traffic, it's okay. But now you are bringing so much traffic, that make a difference. You know, things happen because you have you brought in too many cars.
And 15
You know,
minutes apart, that's
Okay,
works.
I understand. We had this
Yes.
discussion.
Yes.
Your husband was there when we
have
met
a
at
light
the, you
discussion.
were not,
Yeah.
but we fully had this discussion, and that's why I prefaced my remarks by saying, I fully understand your
Right.
point in this.
So that's why
So-
we have
but
this
ma'am, I do
meeting.
understand-
You cannot always compare, oh, previous it's there, so nothing happened. No, you cannot compare with the previous, because the previous we have a very light traffic there, so it's fine.
I'm gonna say again that I understand your point. None of this is lost on me.
Mhm. Thank you.
It is just that is not the only thing that, in starting a business there, that I have to think about. That's why I said everything else I said about making sure the city understands your point of view completely and abiding by whatever the city ultimately wants us to do, okay?
So we got just a couple more slides to go through here that are mostly illustrative. This is a rendering of what the site would look like. Hopefully you'll notice all of the new greenery that is being proposed here. We're proposing to maintain the wide walking area, and it's a much more beautiful site than what's out there now. If you want to go to the next slide.
We'll reconstruct the sidewalk on Cross Street.
Thank you.
My understanding is that granite is the preferred.
Curve.
I'm only laughing because there's one neighbor in particular that insists on it being granite, but we have no problem. There's nothing there now. It's broken down and it's horrible, so we will build a sidewalk on the Cross Street side.
And a picture of the site frontage on Washington Street, and again, what's going to be proposed I won't go into a ton of detail here, but it's a much better looking site frontage on Washington Street than what's out there today.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
And that gives us a nice segue into the customer experience from Joe.
Okay. And thank you for introducing me. For those that came in, I'm Joe Goulian. I'm the VP of Retail Operations for SIN. I have been in retail for 35 years. Most of that was with Ralph Lauren, where I ran their luxury stores across the United States. I spent, in the last 5 years, I entered the cannabis business in Colorado. 3 weeks into adult use being passed there, which was the first state, I operated what became the busiest store in the state, and I did that with high integrity, with local employees. We operated in compliance, never out of compliance, and I fully intend to take that experience and apply it to this store as well. So what I would like to do now is just talk a little bit about how you will enter the site, talk a little bit about our security, and then into our shopping experience. So first of all, we will engage people that walk in the door with a security member, an employee of ours that will vet them before they go in, make sure that they're legal. Once they do get in the door, there will be a second security checkpoint where we will check their ID, and before they make a purchase, there will be a third security check to make sure that the people that buy cannabis are legally allowed to do so. And in this state, that means you have to be 21 years or older and have a valid state ID that can ensure that you're allowed to buy from us. From a customer experience standpoint, maybe what we might want to do is put the actual store design.
The interior, yeah.
Okay. Can I borrow?
I would be happy to lend it to you.
All right, so this will be the entrance right here. Again, we will have someone on the sidewalk that will check the ID before they come in. There will be a double check at the security site, and then you will enter the building. You will notice there are fixtures here on the floor. The first thing I want to stress is that there will never be marijuana on the floor that someone could steal. There will be one spot, this is called a flower bar, where you can take a look at it, smell it. Those jars are tethered to a fixture. They cannot be removed. That will be the only spot in the entire front where cannabis will be present. Again, those jars cannot be removed. They're tethered to the bottom of the fixture. These will have other products, topicals, tinctures, edibles, etc. These are the POS stations where the transaction will occur, but the orders will be placed here and executed by our staff and fulfilled here. In the back here is our vault where we will house the cannabis. This will be highly secure, and every bit of product will be pre-packaged. That means that there'll be no weighing on the floor. There'll be no way for that to be diverted. At the end of every day, we must do a full inventory to make sure that not 1 gram is missing. That's part of the seed to sale requirement in the state, and we will follow that to the nth degree. So the potential for theft or loss is almost impossible. If it does occur, we cannot leave the building until we reconcile that inventory. Let's see, what else? As far as the size of our staff and the experience, we realize that this is a new business and a new industry, so education is critical. So our people will be highly trained and skilled. We'll have educational materials on site, and we'll have the ability to answer any question. The important thing is to explain to people what the dosing requirements are, how we suggest that it is consumed, and the delivery methods for actually dosing marijuana. So our staff will be highly skilled and highly trained, and we'll make sure that any question will be able to be answered by any of our personnel. We plan to employ in the store probably around 25 to 30 employees. We would like to, as we do in every endeavor, hire local as best as possible, and that will be our intent. Like I said, most of those will be full-time employees. The wages will start at $15 an hour and go up from there. In that makeup of staff, we'll probably have about 5 to 8 management staff that will, earn a significant amount more. So from an employment standpoint, this will be a business that, like I said, employs people locally and hopefully provide, some, economic opportunities for local residents. Let's see. Customer education, again, we kind of touched on that. First of all, again, we're going to talk about, how you get in and how we make sure that you cannot, enter illegally. The visual materials exist. Auditor reminders. I think that basically that just is there to make sure that people follow the rules and follow them to the letter of the law. And then there's plenty of takeaway materials for people that understand that you need to consume this product safely, that it can't be diverted and resold. That's part of our ethos and how we're going to operate. You want to talk about our community pledge?
I do, and I want to add a couple of things to this. So it was alluded to earlier, we will encourage both our customers and our employees to do something other than drive to the site, right? So our website is going to be an experience for people in and of itself. Most people today don't go to a brick and mortar place unless they go to the website first. That's how you familiarize yourself with the place that you're going to. It is a great delivery system for a company's messaging and what it wants customers to do or avoid doing. So we will be encouraging our customers to not drive, or to drive as little as possible. All of our employees we will buy Charlie cards for, so they have the ability to take public transportation. We will have bike rack available for both customers and employees. And bike storage lockers we're also looking into for our employees who bike to work and want to have a place to secure their bicycle while they're at work for the entire day. In terms of the material that people get, there are two things. One, the Cannabis Control Commission in the regulations sets forth some of the educational material that every customer must receive. And it is really largely around how to safely transport, consume, and store products that you buy in a cannabis retail. Unlike a lot of other companies, we take those materials, in addition to telling people about them and having a written material available for them to read in the store, we take the materials and we put them in every single bag. Because in much the same way as when you and I go to CVS and pick up a prescription, they always say, do you have any questions? And you always look at them and say no, because you just want to get out of the store because you've been standing in line for an hour. When you get home, you think to yourself, what am I supposed to do with this stuff again? And that's when you look to read the directions. That's exactly the principle that we think works well here. People should be reminded at every turn about how to do this safely. So we actually include written materials in the bag as well. So the atmosphere that we are trying to create, this is a store. I realize that it's a highly regulated product. I realize that people have very strong feelings about cannabis. If you're a person who is against the idea of cannabis being sold, generally, we're not here to convince anybody of anything. What we're here to sort of describe to you is the way that we are functioning within the regulations in circumstances where we are going above and beyond, because we want people to be able to partake of a legal product, but to do so safely. The last thing that we have every single one of our customers do, we're a retail operation, we're a store, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. So every single customer, your first visit is probably the one where you get the greatest level of introduction because it's going to be your first time there. Every customer has to sign what we call a customer pledge, and our customer pledge requires a person to sign it and confirm that they're in receipt of the customer pledge. It basically outlines for them, it's a couple of paragraphs long, and it basically says, I understand that I am a customer of Ascend. I understand that Ascend is part of a community that has a community standard. I understand that nuisance behavior, diversion, any behavior that's considered to be untoward or unsavory is not acceptable. One of the things that Joe talked about was the prepackaging of products. Everyone who leaves any Ascend operation, products are all placed in an opaque bag that has a barcode on it that is stamped, this product contains THC, and has a child-resistant enclosure. It's actually, for some people it's adult resistant. It's actually not easy to get open at all. The barcode refers to, Joe referred to the seed to sale tracking system. From the time that a seed is planted, or however a plant is generated, it is tagged. The state knows what's on that tag. It is followed throughout its entire growth cycle to the point where it is harvested, to the point where it is turned into anything that it might be turned into, and to the point of sale. The state knows exactly what has happened to that plant. The barcode on the bag tells you exactly who bought that plant. If someone were to leave, even though they will be cautioned, we will have exterior cameras, interior cameras, you cannot consume this product in public. It is illegal. You are not allowed to consume it anywhere in public. If anyone were to find a bag that came from Ascend anywhere, we want to know about that because we look up the barcode on the bag, we know exactly who we sold to. That person is barred from all Ascend facilities. So they sign a customer pledge that says if I engage in behavior that I should not be engaging in of any kind. That includes loitering. And I don't think this is a store, I know people think that people sort of hang around because it's a cannabis store. That doesn't happen. They actually tend to be among the safest places in any neighborhood and increase the safety in the neighborhood because everyone knows how well the camera surveillance works. But the customer pledge says, I understand that I will not be welcome in the store. I will not be welcome at any Ascend store. So it's not like they can just go to another location. And that is part of our way of doing whatever we can to make our customers as responsive to a community standard as we possibly can. That doesn't happen anyplace else. It does not happen outside of a liquor store. It does not happen outside of a bar or a restaurant where people fall out of there at 3 o'clock in the morning, to the gills, spoiling for a fight. No other places do that. We do that. Cannabis operations do that.
Just to tag on to that statement, I mean, selling cannabis is a privilege. It's not a right. We take that very seriously, and we have systems and policies in place to make sure that that privilege, is not taken advantage of. That's how we operate.
So in terms of we're almost at the end of it. In terms of our community relations, Joe mentioned managers and assistant managers. There will be a number that will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that will be available on our website. People can contact if they see anything that they don't like or if they have an issue. We prefer that you not use it for regular questions. But only if you feel that there's something that needs to be reported. You can call that number and it'll be recorded and we will look into whatever it is that is being reported. We are a business like any other business. We join chambers of commerce. We join local business associations, civic associations. We do what other businesses do. There are, communities have neighborhood cleanups. They have things around the holidays. Our employees will be participating in those things and we will be part of those things as well. That is in part our way of keeping skin in the game. It's not that we are in a neighborhood and we are not part of that neighborhood. So we actively participate and we sponsor community events, we sponsor cleanups. Even though the rules don't actually allow us really to sort of say that we're doing that because they're still not sure where they are on the advert, whether or not they consider that advertising. I'm not sure that it is. It doesn't mean that we don't do it. You may not necessarily see our name there, but it doesn't mean that we haven't made a contribution. In terms of public health, we have been working with representatives from the Newton Board of Health to sort of monitor and mitigate health impacts in the city. They're very interested in us participating and doing sort of educational outreach and providing educational material not related to cannabis so much, but because there is such a large opioid problem, there are lots of other mechanisms of drug use that create greater health impacts. We're certainly willing to do that. All of the labeling of all of our products will comply completely with all state and local requirements. And we also provide the supplemental information inside of the, about consumption, transportation, and storage inside of every package. In terms of our contribution to sustainability, I've already talked to you about that. I think we can do some things in this parking lot that are great. At the cultivation facility in Athol, it actually sits along Miller's River and has hydro turbines that they haven't been in use for a while. It's going to cost us a little bit to knock the rust off them and get them going. We hope to be powering, using some solar, but also using hydro turbines to power the cultivation in Athol. We are also looking into whether or not any one of our products can be packaged in either recyclable material or biodegradable material of some kind. So we're looking at our impact on sustainability in a number of different ways. As most people know, under the rules, there is a level of tax revenue if Newton will exercise its option to have a local excise tax. 3% of our annual gross revenue from this store will go to the city of Newton for its own priorities, and it can spend it as it sees fit. As I say, we support local civic organizations and charitable organizations. As Joe mentioned, we think it'll be over 35 well-paying jobs. We're going to try to accommodate. There are lots of people that can only work part-time. Some single moms have issues with childcare. There are retirees. We get a remarkable number of retirees, actually, that are interested in working in a cannabis operation. And so we're going to try to mix those two things so that we get to as many people as possible, and it is $15 an hour to start. And that's, those are essentially our community, that's our community portfolio, for lack of a better term. And I think Dan is going to talk to you for a few minutes about security. That's one of the biggest questions we get, our presence in the community and security. So Dan?
Thanks, Andrea. As Andrea said, I'm a recovering police officer. I was a cop for 28 years. I came to this space kind of like turning the JFK aircraft carrier around. I was involved in narcotics investigations, worked undercover in Boston, did cases with the DEA, ATF, up to including the cartel. I'm proud to say my detectives were involved in the case where Chapo Guzman just got sentenced to life. When the chiefs of police were asked for their opinion on medical marijuana being on the ballot, I stood with a bunch of police chiefs and the governor up at the State House and said, we shouldn't do this. This is going to lead to increased utilization by youth. We're going to see crime around these dispensaries. We're going to see robberies. We shouldn't do it. Well, I voted no, and the majority of the citizens of Massachusetts voted yes. After the Marathon bombing case got to the U.S. Attorney's Office, my wife and I had enough of BPD and kind of being on the treadmill 24 hours a day. I opened up my own consulting company, working for the Department of Justice out of my house. I worked for DOJ. I was in Ferguson for the Brown investigation, helping out with that. Worked for the State Department, training foreign national police departments and doing other consulting work. I'd been approached by companies to be involved, and I said, I'm not interested. My neighbor, who is she had no family. We've been friends for 25 plus years, came down with stage 4 lung cancer. Because I was working out of my home, I was able to take Eileen for her treatments back and forth for chemo radiation. I saw that maybe I was mistaken, because there was maybe some benefits to medical cannabis that could alleviate some suffering, and that I might have made a mistake. I think it's the only mistake I made. My wife assures me it's a common occurrence. Started to get asked about this. I came to Kroll, and Kroll had some clients that were interested in the space. My bosses asked me to look around and see what was the land work out there. I talked to Brookline, Dee O'Leary, the chief there, Mary Butler in Salem, the chief here in Newton. How bad is it? How much, is it showing up in the high schools? How many robberies they had? What's it look like? And the crime stats around these facilities have actually gone down. The increased presence, the increased utilization, the cameras in Brookline have actually solved crimes unrelated to the dispensary for crimes that were around them because of the enhanced camera system. So Kroll decided to get involved in the process. I have clients worldwide. I have clients in Mexico and Colombia that protect chemicals and biological companies that are making products that are a lot more harder to secure in those environments than they are here. Ascend has not committed to meet the standards of the state. They have committed to breaking them and exceeding them. Gene is very qualified to develop policies, plans, procedures, and all of that. Andrea's asked me to come in and assist him and bring some more to that, because it's great to have 300 cameras that watch things 365 days a year. But if you don't have somebody who's going in and checking the systems, looking at the camera to make sure we wrote a policy that says this is the way we go in and out of the vault, is it actually being followed? So that's the type of things that we do with Kroll. When I came on board, Andrea was very clear in making sure that, similar to her prior career, my prior career, in Boston. When I went to a community group, it was to enhance the quality of life in the neighborhood, to deal with the quality of life issues. It might not be the police. I looked at shootings and stabbing sometimes as the issues, and the community was looking at racing cars and loud music and kids who unattended. And I realized that we have to work with the community to identify their challenges and concerns. So my job is to work, identify groups out there, make sure I'm out there, and as anything comes up, to fully coordinate with the community, the neighbors, the police, the schools, to make sure we're addressing it. If our package shows up in a school in Newton, in Weston, in anywhere, we want to be able to get that information, work with authorities to identify who purchased it, who diverted it, and hold them accountable. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I'll be happy to take questions after the fact, specifically to security. We have a robust program, the best cameras and technology, but not only that, we've got a compliance program where we're going outside the walls of our facility. You know, ordinarily, the package store stops at the sidewalk. If somebody's down in the public park drinking nip bottles, that's not their problem. They don't take action and ban people from coming back to the liquor store. That's exactly what we do. And people say, well, how are you going to, if a neighbor snaps a picture and it's, you know, a guy in a blue striped sport coat, and they said, hey, this guy was down the playground using your marijuana in front of the kids, in front of me and my dog as we were walking, and we go and check our video, and that's one of our customers, they're out. So when they go to Joe's, personnel at the front door, and they verify them, they're gonna get in, they're 21, when they come to the security desk, we run them through a system, just like nightclubs do. We check the card, and if he's been boycotted from the property, whether it's Ascend Newton or Ascend Boston, that's it. You don't have a right to come to a store, and if you're not a good customer who's gonna help us with the neighbors who are rightfully so concerned about the quality of life and its impacts, if you're not working to make sure that we don't impact the area negatively, then we don't want you as a customer. So I'll leave it there, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So, do you want to, I can finish up with the last one, yeah. So, just so that you know, I'm not gonna go through all of this, I'm just gonna be really brief. The Cannabis Control Commission's regulations are very specific about, what we need in terms of security. We have to have, a redundant alarm system, so that, an alarm system that works, and then either a backup alarm system run by a generator or by a separate company in case there is a storm and it knocks out the first one, so that our alarms are always working. There are exterior surveillance cameras that will cover the parking lot and will cover the exterior of the building. There are interior cameras. There has to be a camera on the vault at all times, any place that you have product. The regulations require that you have a camera on that at all times. The people who provide our hardware are FTG Security. They will monitor our cameras, despite the fact that we will have internal monitoring of our cameras, internal screens. FTG monitors our site remotely 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If the Newton Police Department wants to have a direct feed from our exterior cameras into the police department, we permit that. As Dan said, it actually helped in Brookline to solve an armed robbery. It had nothing to do with the cannabis operation. But the police department can have access to that exterior feed because it is going to show them the entire area, the streets all around the operation. By and large, there are virtually no incidents in cannabis operations. As I say, we will also internally monitor these feeds, and staff will be on the lookout for anything that is untoward. There will be panic buttons, duress buttons. A lot of this is done in an abundance of caution, because when you actually look at the data, there aren't incidents that require all of these things, but they are required at the startup, so that everybody feels comfortable with it. You will have security, plainclothes security. They will never be armed, but plainclothes security personnel will be inside, and there will be parking attendants on the outside. If the Newton Police Department, there have been other places that you've seen around where they've had police detail. Those are largely places where there's no parking lot, so it's really the police officer is there largely to make sure that the parking on the street, people aren't double parking and going into the facility. But if the police want us to have a detail there, we're happy to do that. The experience has been that they may initially assign someone, but there are no incidents, so they end up sort of pulling them back in. We mentioned the seed to sale tracking system and preventing diversion. That is the chief concern of the Cannabis Control Commission. So everything is done by weight. The weight that leaves the Athol facility, the weight of what is grown, the weight the product is when it leaves Athol, the weight that it is when it gets to a retail dispensary, and what is sold, and then the weight that you have left, and you have to account for pretty much literally every single seed. I also said that we go a long way to preventing nuisance, but we welcome the community's input if people see anything that ought not to be happening. And of course, we have our customer pledge, and that's essentially what we do at Ascend. So we're now at the question and answer part. We'll try to do it in as orderly a way as possible. I would also ask people to ask a single question, and then we can move on to someone else. If we have time, we'll come back around.
Yes, the recent Boston Globe expose that was titled "For Sale in the Pot Industry."
Speak louder, please.
There was a recent article in the Boston Globe that I'm sure many of you read about political influence in the pot industry. I'm sure you've certainly read it. It covered that Ascend Wellness's executives, Chief Strategy Officer Frank Perullo and CEO Abner Curtin have multiple companies that are opening cannabis dispensaries through Ascend Wellness, Union Twist, which also proposes to open in Newton, and another investment fund that plans to open a store in Athol in a building owned by Ascend Wellness's Curtin and Perullo. If all of these open, this will be 7 known stores owned or controlled by major shareholders of Ascend in Massachusetts, with many more stores in 3 other states. Perullo is also affiliated with Sea Hunter and Verdant Medical, which are applying for multiple licenses. It is unknown if any of you plan to open more under other shell companies. With all of these interrelated shell companies opening dispensaries, why should Newton do business with Ascend and its shareholders when it is already being very creative in skirting the state law on the 3-store limit? And how can we be confident that you won't be creative in skirting other laws that you consider to be inconvenient?
I'm happy to answer that question. And I don't accept the premise of the question to begin with, and I know that you have that question on your listserv, and I think a question that makes accusations that are actually demonstrably false is a dangerous question. Notwithstanding that, I'm happy to answer it. Ascend Mass and Ascend,
reporters, not from me.
no, but that's not, I'm well aware of what the story said because Abner Curtin sat with the Boston Globe Spotlight team for an hour. Frank Perullo sat for an hour and a half. I also sat for an hour and a half. People who have something to hide from the Boston Globe Spotlight team, and there is no one in this room that does not understand what the Spotlight team does and how a narrative is built around a particular story. People with something to hide don't sit with them. It's the people who don't return their phone calls that I would suggest that most people should be worried about. We didn't have anything to hide. We are not in violation of any Cannabis Control Commission regulation. We do not have 7 stores operating. And the reason why I took exception to your question is because if you actually read the article, you are conflating Frank Perullo's work as a consultant with the Novus Group, which is a company that he founded and ran. He consulted with cannabis operators. That is very separate from him opening up his own shop, which is Ascend Mass and Ascend Wellness are. You can't conflate those two things. You can operate as a consultant for cannabis operators who don't know what the rules are. This is a brand new industry. There's not a single cannabis operator that came into this space that understood what individual municipal processes were going to be. Most of them, the process for Newton was just issued this February. And this was legalized 2 years ago. Municipalities are feeling their way the way everyone else is. Every cannabis company coming in needs someone to guide them through the process. That's what consultants do. That is very different from Frank being a principal in Ascend Wellness and Ascend Mass. And to conflate those two things and say that because his clients as a consultant have a certain number of stores, they add on somehow to the stores that Ascend is trying to open is unfair. And quite frankly, it is actually false. That's part of the reason I took exception to your question. We are permitted currently for an RMD, that is a medical marijuana facility in Cambridge. That is one facility. The CCC regulations say under a particular license you can have 3 facilities. So for a medical license you can have up to 3 RMDs. For a retail license you can have up to 3 retail locations. For a cultivation you can have up to 3. And for a processor you can have up to 3. We don't have a processing license. And transportation will be the same way. We are permitted for 1 RMD and seeking a medical license for that. We are permitted, we are seeking a permit in Newton, and we have been permitted in Boston for 2 retail. And we'll seek a CCC license for 2 retail. We're still well under the cap. Union Twist, neither Frank Perullo nor Abner Curtin have any ownership interest in Union Twist. Part of the reason we sat so long with the Boston Globe was we were at great pains to explain that to them. We have no management service agreement with Union Twist. We're not providing them services. We don't have a supply agreement. We don't have an agreement to supply. Why? Because at some point it became clear that there was no real guidance coming from the CCC about how one company could be involved with another. We said we won't do anything. We're not doing anything with anyone until the CCC gives us guidance on that. They always had a rule that said you couldn't own more than 10%. Frank and Abner don't own anything in Union Twist. You can own just under 10%, it's really 9.9%, but you can't own over that. So I understand to some degree, because I had the same reaction to the Boston Globe story, despite what we told them, that they were pursuing a narrative, and they were doing it, they may have been doing it in good faith, but they were wrong in some of the things that they reported. But the extrapolation of what they wrote to make a greater accusation against the company, I do take exception to, and that's why you've gotten the answer from me that you've gotten, because none of that is accurate.
So are you going to be releasing the ownership and investors in Ascend Wellness, and also disclosing what other ownership interests they have in other cannabis-related businesses, so that we can confirm that that is true? Because I assume you must have given it to Boston Globe, and yet they felt there was still a lot of ownership sort of in a number of shell companies. So are you going to be disclosing that to Newton?
You really shouldn't be calling them shell companies until and unless you have proof that that is happening, and that is not what is happening. The other thing is, we disclose all of our, and this is probably the largest point, in some respects I think I buried the lead here. The Cannabis Control Commission is the regulator. Neighborhoods and communities are not the regulator. The regulator decides whether or not, before it issues a license, a company comports with its regulations. We have applied for a state license. There will be no stone left unturned. They're very careful. I know this from being on the Cannabis Advisory Board. They're very careful about who they license. They will look at all of that, and they will make a decision as to where the ownership lies. Ours, I think, is very, very straightforward, and they will make that decision in issuing the license. At that point, what has been submitted to them is public information. The reason why it is not public up until that point is because they have not issued a license, and investors have privacy too. But the point at which they are issued a state license to do business, then that privacy interest is balanced against the need for the public to know. But no, we do not come to community meetings, nor do we release publicly, nor do we give to the Globe any of this information. No one would ask Trader Joe's for that. No one would ask Sephora for that. This is a retail business.
But there's no store limit for Trader Joe's or for grocery business. Exactly. There is in cannabis, and why is there not transparency so that Newton voters can know that what you're saying is true? Because by the time, the Cannabis Control Commission has not been policing this, and so we're depending on them, first of all, and second of all, by the time they decide yea or nay, it's too late for us to do anything about it. If we find things that in your ownership on multiple companies that Newton doesn't like.
But if they would say nay if they found something that ran afoul of the regulations. And if we didn't run afoul of the regulations, Newton is not going to have an issue with it because we are complying with what the law requires. That's the reason. And you know as well as I do, and the second question that you just asked is among the questions that was on the listserv, and I appreciate the fact that you pretty much recited it verbatim because I read it, and that was good. But you know as well as I do that if people are against a particular thing, just as I pointed out in the first question that you asked, you can cherry pick anything and it misleads people. That question, the first question you asked me, I'm very sorry, it was misleading because it was inaccurate. So suggesting that we give up publicly investor information where we know we're not running afoul of the regulations, and we are confident that the CCC will feel the same way, so that people can decide. We don't know where that information is going. You could decide to target an investor. People might get phone calls. They might get followed. Any one of those things can happen. There are fundamental privacy interests that people, by virtue of investing in a business or having ownership of a business, do not relinquish because they are involved in a process of getting licensed. And that's why we don't give it up. But there is a point at which those interests get balanced against the community's interest or the government's interest in transparency. And when that happens, then those things will become public, but not before then.
My name's Kurt Lamb. I'm a neighbor, not exactly a butter, but I do own a business in your block on Washington Street. And I'd like to talk a little bit about parking. I applaud your efforts to get your employees to and clients to take public transportation. But public transportation to your facility is commuter rail and suburban bus. That we're nowhere near a suburb. And what I can say from experience, because we have a lot of clients coming to our business in your block, people don't come by public transportation. So that makes me concerned when I hear that you have 25 to 30 employees. And my guess, you haven't said how many clients would typically be in the building, but my guess it's about the same. So it seems to me that you're providing about half the parking not that the city requires. It seems like you're going to meet what the city requires, but only about half of what your facility requires. And so I think about how can you improve the amount of parking you're providing. Not many ideas come to mind. I think your planner has done a pretty good job of planning things. Maybe personally, I'd be in favor of maximizing the number of cars in the lot. Maybe turning the driveway to the right on certain times in end-to-end parking for employees. And by the way, I think exiting on one thing, utilization. I think you planned it well for utilization. And I think utilization is better if there's an entrance and a separate exit, as it is now. So personally, I like the version of entering on Washington Street and exiting on Cross Street. I think that will encourage people to use it. If it's a dead-end parking lot, people have more trouble. Mm-hmm. So there's maybe a little that you could do to improve the parking, but the only real way to make a difference would be if your facility was half as big. If you had, instead of 15 to 30 employees, if you had 12 to 16 employees, and then I think that the number of cars that you need to run your facility would match the number of cars that you have.
So could I speak to that for a moment?
I just want to thank him for the comment, because the question, the point is well taken, and the comment was thoughtful, and I appreciate it. So thank you for. Joe doesn't want to.
So while we will have the staff anywhere from 25 to 35, of course, we don't know. We'll react to the business needs. At any one time, there will probably be a maximum of about 12 to 15 employees. That's the total staff. They won't be all there at once.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're probably looking at, again, it's based on the needs of the business, but I foresee, based on my experience in this industry and retail in general, that we'll probably be maxed out on our busiest day with about 15 employees.
And how many clients do you expect at any given point?
Yeah, I mean,
who wants to do peak? Well, it's almost between the two of you, but during.
So from a vehicular basis, we expect somewhere around a total of 50 round trips into the site during the biggest peak hour on a weekday. That doesn't necessarily answer the question of exactly how many people will be in the store at one time, but you can do the math there. That's about one round trip per minute.
And so 50 per hour and if it takes them a half hour, that'd probably be 25 client cars and 15.
Based on my experience, it will probably be about a 13 to 16 minute average. There will be people that will have a lot of questions that might take a half an hour, but my experience is it's probably around 13 to 15 minutes per visit.
And some of that is assisted by kind of this new technology where, like Dunkin' Donuts, you can order ahead on an app, and instead of going in and looking and ordering there, it's already prepackaged. You go in, you identify yourself, pick it up, pay, and go.
And that's a great point by Dan, is we expect between about 30 and 40% of our business to be order ahead. And obviously that will be in and out very quickly, and we'll design a register and fulfillment process that makes that as quick and effortless as possible, and we'll certainly encourage people to do that.
Well, I feel a little better about it given that input, but I would say that even so, it seems like you're somewhat beyond the number of spaces that you have provided there. And I don't know if there's anything you can do to improve the number of spaces or to reduce the size of the facility.
Probably not, and have the landscaping that is also required by the regulations. But to your point, it's really, it can be, it's not impossible. We can certainly get a good estimate in terms of vehicular traffic and foot traffic through before the place opens. But part of the reason that we will do by appointment only, certainly to start, and we'll be measuring it, is so that we can measure in real time how many people we're getting, how many people are ordering ahead and just coming to pick up, how many people are coming by car, what is happening. We need to be able to see it. When we're measuring, literally Matt stands outside and does the number of cars going up and down Washington Street just to get an idea of the general traffic and notes where they park. Once we're open, we'll be able to do.
So maybe you could collect statistics about how many at any given moment are, how many total parking.
Right. Right.
That would be great.
We'd like to get as near an idea.
If we could have that on an ongoing basis, because obviously it's in your interest to have hundreds of people using it quickly and as many as you can, but it's not in the neighborhood's interest to have this facility grow beyond its ability to provide parking.
I want to recognize Councilor Cody.
Thank you. So, Jim Cody, City Council at Large, and Kelly, we've had discussions amongst us, and I sent off an email to the law firm representing Ascend that their building is oversized for the type of facility it is by regulation. So I'd like to see possibly for parking issues, if that building could be taken down, and then have a look at the parking situation. So that's something, that's like a city council type function as we get into land use. So we'll look at that, and then that's something we work with the ownership on. It's not something they might have to do if they meet the regulations, but something we could ask to be done.
I just want to be really clear, we're not over the 5,000 square feet, though it's really 4,990 something. That is within the regulations, that is compliant with the regulations, but the building itself is 8,300. Right. So there's another 3,000 to 3,300 in back that we don't intend to use for any purpose whatsoever. But the councilor had a suggestion that we demolish it, and that's really inexpensive. We can do that tomorrow. No, but and actually, you know what's funny? Another person actually had that same suggestion. So it's up twice now.
My question is this: I'm sure you guys all came here with public transportation or rode your bike. Whether you haven't. No one really in the middle of winter or in cold times, I don't think you would be riding your bike to this place. They're gonna be driving. Okay? And what you sell there doesn't really matter to me, as long as it's legal. So I don't care what's inside of it, what you do there, how you put bells and whistles in it. It doesn't really matter to anybody. Right? How you secure it and what you weigh and the security camera doesn't really matter.
It matters to some people.
It matters to some people, but really, it's what kind of bushes, if it's red, green, or purple. No one cares. Okay, maybe some people do.
We don't.
But that wasting time talking about that isn't the issue.
Right.
What I know for a fact is that no one here lives in that neighborhood. I know that for a fact. I know for a fact that no one here has considered the children. I know for a fact.
You don't.
No, hold on. I know that for a fact. I know that for a fact. Let me finish.
I live in the neighborhood. I biked
Do
here.
you have a question?
You know, so a lot of your premise is really false.
Let me get
Just answer your question.
Let me get there, because what you haven't also considered, and not even council, the alderman has considered the streets that they're gonna be passed through, like Parsons Street or Cross Street. Or Eddy Street. People are gonna be trying to get to there, purchase their stuff, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, they have to get there. And they're gonna be trying to get there. So all these, like Parsons Street is gonna be a pass-through. They're gonna be parking there, and they're gonna be passing through there. My son was hit by a car last year while he was playing, and there's a lot of children on that street. No one considers that. No one considers the amount of children that are on those streets. Have you considered that? Have you considered that? Was your son that was hit by a car?
Sir, I understand.
It was mine.
Sir, I know that you're.
All right? And no, let me finish, because it was my son
haven't
that was
asked us
hit
a
by a car.
question.
And so the question is, the amount of traffic that's going to be going through those streets, like Parsons Street, like Cross Street, like Eddy Street, It's a serious problem. They're gonna be parking there, and you're saying, well, no, they're all gonna be biking, or they're gonna be taking the train, or they're gonna be taking the Greyhound, or they're gonna be taking Excella. They're not. And they're gonna be parking in our neighborhood.
What question are you asking?
The question is,
How are you protecting?
how are you protecting my children? How are you protecting the children? The children that are gonna be, because there's a lot of them, there's a lot of children.
Question. I'm happy to answer
How do you
your
protect
question.
the children, not the people that are
heard you.
there?
I heard you. But it is not necessary.
There's gonna be a lot of parking on the
do you
streets.
want me to answer your question? I am
Yeah, how do you
happy to
protect
answer.
the parking?
I understand that
The
you're
driving.
upset. I understand that this is emotional for you. This is a community meeting. Of course, we consider that. You just outlined to me a situation that happened where your son was hit, and
Right.
it wasn't because there was a building operating there. This is going to be a business one way or the other.
But no.
Sir,
but
let me finish.
No, hold on. Let me finish.
No, I'm
When it
answering
happened,
your
the business that was there
No.
had low impact traffic.
No.
You told me that Trader Joe's has a lot of traffic, right?
does. Yes,
and yours
it
is gonna
does.
have a lot, even adding to that. Even adding to that.
Will you please let me answer your
And there's
question?
gonna be a lot of parking. That had no parking
I
on the
can
streets.
either answer
And
your
I
question
guarantee
or
there'll
I
be parking.
cannot answer your question. But if all you want to do is make a statement, we'll move on to someone else.
Answer my question.
Okay?
I think
The-
one,
The presumption that nobody cares about children, I realize that this comes from an emotional place for you, it's just wrong.
There's a lot of
It
children.
is just wrong. You don't get people at a table who have devoted their entire lives to government and public safety who don't consider those things. So you are
Okay,
just
so
wrong.
tell me.
Sir, you are just wrong about that. That said, people who drive badly, whether there's a little bit of traffic or a lot of traffic. Any business there, if a Trader Joe's, or another Trader Joe's or a Dunkin' Donuts were to go up there, there'd be a lot more traffic than what we're expecting from this cannabis operation. We've looked at the Trader Joe's traffic, it's twice as much.
Right.
Right. But a business is going to go there. It is not just going to be empty forever.
It could be low impact.
And but you don't have a control of that. It's who owns the property and what business they put up. If a restaurant and a bar that are popular come in there, you're going to have a lot of
But if
traffic.
we get enough signatures and present it to the people that say,
Well, you
if
can
don't listen to us,
organize
we're gonna
that
vote you
outside
out.
of this
We're gonna
meeting.
vote you out.
You can organize that. You are free. That is your right as a citizen to organize that, but that you cannot use our community meeting to organize the opposition to what
No,
we are
I'm not
doing.
using that. I'm asking, so how are you gonna prevent all that amount of traffic that you said 30 people, 10, even if it's 10 people a minute or an hour
We do
going
not
through the parking
prevent
and trying that?
traffic to a business. We mitigate it. We put things in
How do you
place.
mitigate it?
We just finished explaining that,
It's
okay?
not gonna
No,
be
we're
through
not gonna-
buses.
it's not gonna- no.
It's not gonna be through
Nothing,
buses,
and there
through
isn't
walk.
an answer that I can give you that will satisfy you. I think we've been clear with people what we are trying to do here. And I understand that the place that this comes from for you is, and I would be as emotional as you are. We will have to respectfully agree to disagree on this subject. And I understand your point. You are free to organize in any way that you see fit, but that's the best answer that I can give you.
Sir, sure. I'll just try and.
Right, yeah.
Because
I'm not seeing it. Thank you, Danny. I'm not seeing
the
everything.
statute, you probably know that I is pretty public on is.
Can you speak
the need-
louder?
Sorry, the need for public transportation access and
They can't
facilities, the need for these facilities. I think the state mandated in the statute that they, and as you posed rightly, and even as the diagram showing the feedback you're getting, there's challenges there in that we don't, commuter rail's a half-mile apart, they serve limited trains. It's
And
not
we
like
already
Green Line
have
Station in
one of
Newton Center, which might have 140 trains each way each day with access throughout the city. Were other sites considered, and what, I know you mentioned passes, are there other things you guys can do to incite or encourage the mass transit to get the cars off the road, to encourage people to really do what we're hearing in these Washington Street proposals for the vision is smart growth? Sorry, well, I think, did you?
Talk about encouraging people to take mass transportation or other alternatives.
And ideally citing there, but since this case doesn't have a good benefit to that basis, can we cite?
This is an excellent question because people sort of have the idea that we just sort of look for something that's available that appeals to us and that's where we want to be. It's actually a far more complicated process. So within every jurisdiction, once the zoning, once it was legalized and the zoning went into place, the city decides which areas will be zoned for this particular use. So immediately, businesses are restricted to those areas that are zoned for this use. This happens to be one of them. For our part, for the company, we try to find a freestanding building. Sometimes you'll see cannabis operations that want to operate on the first floor and there will be retail above them or even apartments above them. We try to find a freestanding building. We try to find buildings that have adequate parking so that we're not enlarging our footprint, we're not building up, we always have to be concerned that neighbors don't want us building up and blocking their view, or otherwise impeding them, that we're not building out. So we try to keep our footprint in a standalone site as much as we possibly can. We also look for parking, but it is a challenge to find
Can I ask
something
one
that
other-
fit, yeah, sure.
As to point sites, the Murray site that was looked at has
Speak
public
louder.
Boy, I
The
come sit
liquor
next to
store,
me.
Murray's Liquor?
Yeah,
No,
sorry,
you're
come
speaking
sit.
to them.
Come
Speak
sit.
to the audience.
Okay, I
I was
would love it
asking
if I
you
could ask my
a question,
question.
so-
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, the Murray site that was looked at has tremendous public transportation access.
Mhm.
And also, when you read the reasoning that they didn't receive their application, sitting here for 5 minutes, you guys nail those. You've got security, experience, skill. Were there other sites looked at that might address some of the, certainly that we're feeling as a community, given the concentration of growth that's coming our way and anything that's bringing more traffic, more
The
people?
Murray site was already taken.
Not anymore.
Yes, I know, I know.
I'm just throwing, I
That- I think that was-
think
was
I've
that
made
the
my.
Garden Remedy?
No, it's not, it's
No,
Newton
right up
Center.
the
Newton Center.
street.
Right to the, where the Newton Center stop.
Well, I guess I'll-
Well, my,
There were a lot of reasons that
Yeah,
site
that's
didn't
what I was
work.
gonna
The
say to
city
Kate.
Cedarburg was.
Many were about
Yeah.
the organization that was applying. If you read the
Pardon?
decision, if you read the decision today, we can talk about that.
Sure,
I'd be
yeah,
happy to show it
so
to
there
you.
were issues about parking and access.
Parking is the only real one that they
Yeah,
had that-
so-
that
and
these
I
guys
will
don't
add to the
address.
public transportation piece, more people would be taking public transportation if it was actually reliable, so there's sort of an issue
But
that.
that's like betting on something that's not coming. I mean,
Well,
unless you're
at the same
defining
time,
the
but then you're
team,
asking-
That's a
asking
tough
us
one.
to fix it
I
all the
agree
time.
with it.
We're never gonna have
That's a
that.
fantasy. I love that you're hoping for that, but it ain't coming.
So, sir, in the blue
saying you
jacket,
can't
you
ask
mean,
that.
sir, in the blue jacket.
That's
Oh,
not
sorry.
realistic.
I just want to speak a little more about
I
the
don't know,
Murray
I don't know where she's going.
location.
I take the tea all
Excuse
the
me.
time, how can you say something like that? You don't
Okay.
support transportation.
I see all the time. I run
Ben has a question?
For accessibility.
Okay.
She's talking, she was
She
talking.
wants to finish.
Just a little more information about the sites that are right in village centers. That was, something that the planning department and the council wanted to avoid. So that's why we've, identified a site which is outside of the
Oh,
village.
so they've asked for you to be outside.
Oh, that's curious.
Oh,
Is that
thank
in
you.
writing, or is that just
Yes.
something that's been conveyed to
Oh,
you?
interesting.
Excuse me?
That desire to be outside village centers, is that something that's in writing
your
somewhere
phone
or
off?
conveyed to you?
I didn't, I defer to, because we didn't go inside the village center, so it wasn't communicated.
Oh, no, I looked up online, I didn't see that anywhere
Wait, and
online.
then the gentleman in the blue can wait.
Yeah, I want to clarify a few things here. So Councilor Kelly and myself, I don't want people thinking I'm in working with ownership coming into here. We were the city council that led the opposition to recreational marijuana. We were the ones that led every aspect of getting it on the vote, the opt-out, so we were against that from the beginning. I'm a parent of many and grandparent of grandfather of 6. I totally get your concerns. So our position for being here today is we're not representative of ownership. We're representative of the people that vote for us, that, of the city itself. Councilor Kelly sits on land use, which is the committee that will be in a special permit process. So she's a representative from West Newton on the land use committee. So I don't want you to think that nobody's representing you here. We represent them also as incoming businesses, but we represent them if they do everything correctly in accordance with the law. And they've been following the law, and it came through the mayor's commission, which is not the city council,
Right.
to get to this point. The city council now gets it, and we feel that we have to follow the guidelines from this point forward. I don't know if Andrea said.
No, it's, the decision to allow up to 8 recreational retail establishments was passed. And again, as Stu said, we were actually not in favor of that. We were in the minority. But what we need to do now is help locate those 8 in good sites. So that's what this kind of conversation is about. Is this the right location? Is it safe? That's what we're here to listen to. So we just want to let you know that we're here to listen to all of it. And we're not aiming at
Count the number of children in the neighborhood.
We hear
I
you.
feel it's a disparity because in this side of Newton, now we are getting our second hot shop within a mile of each other.
And
Yes.
you
Are
are
they in
saying-
Auburn? Are they in Chesterfield? No, they're in West Newton. And I'm tired of this. It's the north side of Newton against the south side, and that's reality.
So we get that. So we're-
That's right.
Really.
We just, we want to keep.
Again, the only deal regulations that we have.
have a question.
Any other, as the questions move on, there's other questions on the floor.
All right, so the gentleman in blue,
Okay. Thank you.
woman in the maroon, the tan, and then you, sir, in the check. And then
Okay.
any other hands?
Thank you, the counselor, and thank you for the business partners. Thank you, I meet you, Andrea, and you guys for the second time today. Thank you for listening to us. I want to say that from the neighborhood side, I know you guys operation great. I know it's for the good for the business. Now I want to say, as a neighborhood, we purchased the cross street, 53 cross since 1997. Been there for quite a while. When we moved here, we consider our kids still young, and that's a good neighborhood. And street side, actually, the neighborhood. We're here, right across the street from your exit. At the time we purchased, this is the parking garage or garage, the south garage. They blocked here, the block it. We saved the safe for our kids, because otherwise. And then later on, they sell to the Beacon Hill Athletic Club. I thought that's okay, that's fine, because that's healthy. So they opened the door, they opened the exit, just across our exit, and they're fine. We're thinking that's fine too. And we still have a block party in the summertime. We feel safe. Now, I know the business right now, you have a street side, all the neighborhood around you guys, and that's probably the good location for you guys. But not think about the neighborhood. We're a neighborhood, we have kids around, like this gentleman just crying, said the kids got hit. I don't think that's hit by whatever the car who purchased this. But however, as I understand from other cities, they operate this. They have a lot of lineup, and that could increase. Somebody take that pot and they're excited and drive away, and who knows who's gonna hit. That's my concern. That's my concern.
I know.
Okay, that's my concern. So that's what I'm reading from the newspaper, lying around whatever. They have a lot of traffic. As this gentleman said, every 15 minutes you can coming out. We are right there.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to reduce this to one question.
I know, hold on. We're right there. I just want to say, lay out who we are, who I am, where I live, right there. And then they can come every 15 minutes. So if that's the case, happen, we cannot get out, in. What are you going to do with that?
Okay.
Do you have measurement for that?
All right, so let me try to address your question.
Okay, I have a quick question. Second.
Let me start here. If there was data that people were coming out of cannabis retail and using, and then getting excited and getting in their cars and driving crazily, you would be among the first people to hear about it, because there would be people screaming it from the hilltops. As a practical matter, it does not happen. The other thing that people forget, and there's something about legalization that makes people forget, that right now, tons and tons and tons of people, adults and young people, are buying this anyway, and they are buying it illegally. And they don't know what they're getting. And they don't know what the strength and the potency of it is. The safest place to buy it is in a cannabis retail. Only adults. There will be no children anywhere allowed inside or around this facility. Unlike a liquor store. I can go into a liquor store tonight and someone will have their young children with them as products are displayed on the shelves that they can take down from the shelves, that they can look at, that they could walk out and drink across the street. And people don't say anything about that. These are completely different facilities that are regulated differently. So I understand you saying, how can you get out? Even if the traffic was pinched to the left on Cross Street, it would not interfere with you getting, I don't see how it would interfere with you getting out of your driveway.
Because they're parking here waiting for the get out, and they could line up right the street out.
If they are waiting to get out. But we don't know that yet. And that's why
I know that. Because I know that. Before they
because
have
they did
that.
when it was the Beacon Hill Athletic Club?
Yeah, they have that in the summer. You go off 6 o'clock or whatever in the afternoon. After work, they line up here. We cannot get in and get out.
Okay, so your issue is with the Cross Street exit, period.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with the store.
Because this increased the traffic at a certain time.
No, okay, so I understand that.
Right.
So that's why I said it to you the night that we were at the Katz's. It's up to the city. You'll be making your pitch to the city. We will have renderings for the city
No.
for both, and they will ultimately
Correct.
decide, right?
The city councilors here, listen to my
The city
concern, right?
councilors,
Right now,
but
let
the
me ask one
transportation
question.
department makes
Let
the
me ask
decision
one question.
on,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If this happens, okay,
Yeah.
do you have a police detailing or something? Do you have a plan?
I told you that, this is what I told you, we were at the Cats, is we are absolutely willing to change the curb cut so that you cannot do anything except take a left. We would sacrifice a parking spot, put a parking attendant there in a booth with a camera on it. If people get out and tried to go the other way, we would have their license plate numbers. They would not be allowed to come back. But they'd still go, but they would still, yeah, people would still go to the left, sure, yeah.
Right now, this is two-way street, okay?
Right.
I cannot say we police, we have to watching them either go right or left. Because sometimes you put the stop sign somewhere, maybe they just go, oh, shortcut, go to the right. I cannot say we policing and watching them to say whatever, we report you. Or we can see somebody throw out to our garden and report to you. That's make us a burden to us, to the neighborhood. That's something you say, okay, we need to happen.
That exists today, we're willing to
We're willing
put personnel there that would
out,
control
so-
traffic in and out, that if you're trying to get out of your driveway, our lot attendant would hold traffic so that you can get out of your driveway. If there's queue up on the street and it's impacting parking, we would then say to people, I'm sorry, we can't handle the volume, you're gonna have to make an appointment and come back. So our appointment only is something we can turn off and on at any time.
That's what I want to ask you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have
I
contingency.
hope
plans.
that in the winter time or the summer or whatever your operation hours, somebody was on site and present, or somebody like you to watching this as it happens.
We're
and
gonna
then
have someone
minimize.
looking at the lot and the traffic as part of our operation.
There were some neighbors that didn't want the parking attendant, so that was sort of a bit of a debate in the last meeting that we had. I think if the city says the cross street exit is the safer of the two, I think having the parking attendant makes a lot of sense there, because it's.
Ma'am in the maroon over there, and then Miss in the second. Ma'am? Sorry.
But that's not the business.
You've got to let other people ask their questions.
Sorry, United States Marine.
She's a Marine.
No, I am. But
Oh, I
saying
thought-
ma'am, saying ma'am.
I thought she was the Marine. I was like, oh.
One comment, okay, so this is part of the city, it was just mentioned in Woburn. And in Woburn, we are going to, there's been a property bought for a cannabis shop that is half a mile from my house, it's right down on Beacon Street, and that will be opening up. There's one on Elliott Street, as well, so there are, I think the city is doing a pretty good job of putting the shops in various parts of the city.
Not in the mayor's
One.
neighborhood.
Number two, I've read the 106-page Cannabis Control Commission report, okay? It's mind-boggling, boring reading, but it covers every possible contingency that you can possibly imagine. In addition, the local regulations.
Please don't be rude to her. Please don't be, but let her finish.
barely hear you.
The local regulations are even more stringent. And I think that I feel perfectly comfortable living very close to this cannabis shop that will be down the street from my house. And I live probably 3/4 of a mile from the one that will be opening up, that has been, that was, Elliott.
Is it on your street? Have they put it on your street?
Yeah, it's on, what, the
Yeah,
one,
sure.
the next one is down the street from me.
Right on that street?
Yes.
Close to green lines.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am?
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, in the second one.
Oh, great. My question is more, I think you guys cover kind of like what's the operation, and as we hear, there's a lot of externalities that come from having a cannabis shop, recreational or not. And one of it is traffic, one of it is gonna be external, like people having children crossing. I need to explain what is this shop and all these things that, you know, even though I'm gonna disclose as a voter, I voted for legalized marijuana. But the one thing I am very concerned about is, as a hosting community, what are we getting from you guys who will be, this is a new industry, but it's a very lucrative industry, of which what is being promised to the city, besides that menial 3% tax that we're getting, which is nothing compared to tobacco tax. I'm taking offense to the fact that it's gonna be this business that we're hosting as a community, like someone that mentioned, is only a mile from the other one, this being West Newtonville area. I wanna know, you list a little bit of like, we're gonna support this and that. But it could be like, I have 5 employees gonna be cleaning up the water supply or something for a day. What is being really promised? Besides just the 3% receipt, maybe we'll get some of that. And I just wanna know, besides the $2,500 that you're giving the city for some nonprofit contribution that was written up in the Newton patch. I just feel like that doesn't feel like a commitment to me. So I'm just curious about what kind of plans and real commitment are you making? If we make this decision to say, yes, open this shop that will be 3 blocks from my house, that's gonna be driving a lot of traffic through Eddy Street, where there's a lot of traffic already.
Right, right. So I understand. I'm not quite sure, well, so I understand what your question is, and the first thing that came to mind was, is the basis of your question that you believe that because it's going to be a lucrative business that you want to hear this? Or is this something that you would ask of a Trader Joe's or any other kind of shop, or is it particular to cannabis? I'm trying to get the premise of
It's particular to cannabis because there is a public health effect to it. There's a lot of evidence for it, and there's a lot of study that needs to be done about.
Well, I won't get into the reason why we don't have that data, because it should not have been a Schedule I drug to begin with. But you're talking about a public health impact. I am happy, I thought I made it pretty clear. Beyond what the city asks us to do in a host community agreement, the city decides what it wants in a host community agreement, right? Mm-hmm. Beyond that, we respond when we are asked to do something or where we see a need to be part of the fabric of the community. We're not there yet. We're not open yet. We have no idea how the community might need us to help. But I thought I made it pretty clear that we are certainly willing to do that. If you want to talk in terms of matching the health impact of a particular thing against the obligation of that industry to pay and make a contribution, I have to talk about alcohol. There is no more deleterious substance on the face of the earth, and liquor stores and restaurants and bars pop up like candy. And no one says that to a liquor industry. And I'm only saying that to say this. I know people have feelings about cannabis. It has been illegal our entire lives. I was a prosecutor. I get it. But until people understand that, especially when compared to something like alcohol, the benefit of this plant, and they're able to let some of their feelings go around it, when all of the things, people think that these horrible things are going to happen, the sky is going to fall. How do I explain this to my children? When you walk by a liquor store, do you explain a liquor store to your children? You can't smell anything coming from this. No one but an adult is allowed inside. People have ideas in their head about what these places look like and how they operate, but they are abstract and they are, quite frankly, inaccurate. And so all I ask people to do is actually look at high-end retail cannabis operations. They are stores. They are like a Sephora with a regulated product, and they are more regulated than alcohol, which flows freely through both the streets and the veins of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I understand how you feel. I get it, but I also get it on the level of a law enforcement person who understands exactly how this plant, which has existed for medicinal and spiritual reasons in cultures for centuries, got a Schedule I designation to begin with. And it had nothing to do with the harm of the plant. It had everything to do with who uses it, and the fact that it might be a little cheaper to have hemp than wood pulp for paper. And there were very significant economic interests that wanted no hemp in this country because they were making money off of paper. There are some very definite reasons that this happened. I get that that's not where we are now, that where we are now is legalization in a population that has always felt that this has always been illegal and therefore probably should remain illegal. It will take years for people to fully come to accept it, but they will accept it in time. If I were in your position, I would be asking the same questions, what are you going to do for the community? But I would also be trying at every turn to hold the industry to a standard. That's why I got into this. Because it's easy to comply with things on paper. It's relatively easy to comply with regulations on paper. What does the company that's going to be in your neighborhood care about? Are they going to listen to you? We can't do everything people want. We're not going to agree with everybody here. Some things are going to not go the way that people want them to go here. But that doesn't mean that we can't be a good neighbor and a good community partner, and it certainly doesn't mean that we don't want to do that. We do. Somebody comes to us and says, we're having a fun run for charity, we want you to contribute a certain amount of money for that, we are there. We will sponsor whether we get credit for the sponsorship or not. We will certainly abide by every element of the host community agreement, but we are open to hearing that people need us for something. I didn't mention this because it's not really part of this store, but Ascend is unique in that one of the things that I'm doing is establishing a separate charitable foundation that will be run independently from us. It's called the We Grow Foundation. It will have its own president and CEO, its own ED. They will make their own decisions. But the money for that foundation, assuming that the IRS doesn't turn on us and say that we can't do it, will come from the net revenue of Ascend. So we will be funding a foundation that will actually have an impact on people who've been affected by the war on drugs, people who've been over-policed, people who've been over-prosecuted, and it will have a community impact. It can support services in the communities that have been disproportionately impacted. It can give grants. I think it can work with banks to subsidize microloans for small businesses and reduce the risk to the banks so the bank opens up its portfolio because they close it up when the economy is good. And the economy is good enough that they don't need to hand out a $50,000 loan to a small business, which is the difference between that business existing in that community and supporting that community and it closing up. That's the kind of stuff that I think revenue from a cannabis company can do, and I'm willing to do that. When I say that we're different, I'm not kidding. And I know the people who hate cannabis or just hate the idea of us being here because they think it's going to be an increase in traffic don't hear that. I have very specific reasons for being involved with this company, and these are among them. So yes, we will do. I'm sure you will be satisfied, but I will tell you this. It's easy to find me, and it's easy to find Ascend. And if we're in your community and we're not doing stuff that you think we should be giving back, it's easy enough to find me or to find our manager, 24/7 number. You can find us and say, look, this is what I think you should be doing. We'll listen to you. We listen to everybody. We can't always do everything everybody wants us to do, but we listen and we try. So yes, in fact, you can make a list as you sit there right now of the things that you think any cannabis operator should be doing to give back to the community. And you give it to me before you go, and you will see how many of those things we get done.
Sir. And then just this gentleman here, and then we'll go into the woman in white, the woman in maroon. So this gentleman here was next, you're second, sir. So go ahead, sir.
I live about 200 feet from this proposed facility up Cross Street, and I've heard from these folks before. They've made themselves pretty available. I know this is their first time out here. I'm not standing up to relitigate whether we voted for marijuana legalization or not. That's a done deal. They either have bought this building or their purchase of the building is contingent on a special permit. You bought it. So they're our neighbor. They bought it. They bought it.
So why are we here?
We're
own
here. The property. We don't have a special permit.
They have to do this as a part of the special permit process. This is the beginning of it, let's say. My concern, and I'm restating it for everybody, you've got just shy of a 5,000 square foot store by 300 square feet per parking space. That's 16.6 spaces, plus another 10 for employees, you're saying.
Yeah.
27, 28-ish, right? So I thought that the mayor in the host community agreement said that you guys would have all of your employees parking off-site. People may want to look at that, and I would really appreciate our counselors looking at that. Second point is, and I've made myself clear about the Cross Street exit. I don't like it. I don't want it there. I want to see a lot of landscaping in this parking lot. My concern is that, and this could be any business, let's say I love these guys. I could love these guys, I could love the business. But I worry that it's like 4 7-Elevens 200 feet from my house, in all honesty. And that's for you guys to handle. And even if I have a even if I have, you know, you on speed dial on my cell phone, the fact is, Cross Street curb to curb is 18'4", and there's a utility pole on one side and a hydrant on the other. If you're driving a snowplow, the utility pole leans in a little bit. Everybody knows all these poles. So the snowplow has to stay back about 1.5 feet, right? So that's 15 feet and change in the wintertime. What is, if you're making a two-way entrance exit in a parking lot in the city of Newton, how wide does it have to be?
20 feet.
No wider than?
No wire. What?
It-
What's the upper limit?
Yeah, it's 25.
25.
So between 20 and 25 feet is what you should have for two-way traffic. And it's 18'4".
Oh, for the roadway, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
so you're making our cross street part of your operation. That's what you're saying, right?
As it is for the site today, yeah.
Yeah, nobody's I'm sorry, I'm not thrilled with the way this cross street exit operates. It's too narrow. And at, let's say, I don't know what your plan says, but how many cars are coming out per 15 minutes?
Right, so it depends on the time, it certainly
does.
does depend on the time of day.
It absolutely
And what we
does.
said earlier is during
Right.
the absolute peak.
What's going to happen
Yeah.
is people are going to come out onto Cross Street out of your lot. They're going to queue up. The last bumper of the last car is going to be clogging up the person coming out of your lot, and they're going to take a right, go right past my house.
They're not gonna.
They're going to do that. I'm sorry. You can't convince me that they're not going to do that.
They can absolutely do it. If we identify them, they won't be allowed back into the house.
Great, but they're going to do it. They're going to do it.
We would ask.
But you can take a right or a left out of the cross street parking lot now.
Yeah.
You can, right, I mean, so we've had this, Tim, you and I have talked about this like at great length. You know that I understand exactly what you're saying. For me, fundamentally, the problem is with the width of the street, but that's unlikely to be enlarged, right?
I understand that.
That's why I said, if the Transportation Department of the City of Newton says, look, we probably should have enlarged this street a long time ago, and we never did, and it's unfair to the people, so we're gonna have to figure something out on Washington Street, we're good with that.
Oh, no, nothing's going to happen on the width of Cross Street. That's like, that never happened.
No, I'm suggesting that if the city, if they look at this and they look and say,
Yeah.
it's not fair for
So-
people.
so I'm gonna-
So we're gonna put it on Washington Street, we'll put it on Washington Street.
You know, several of us really don't like the Cross Street exit.
Yeah.
We've said our piece.
Yeah.
The last thing.
It's too narrow.
Andrea?
Yes, I know, I understand, I understand.
I just want to make sure our counselors follow up on the idea of 18'4". And should they be using that?
All of those things are considered whenever special permit is asked for. Everything to do with proper regulations, width of the road, width of the curb cuts, all of that is addressed. So no stone will be unturned. Andrew just stepped out for a minute, is on land use. So we're in the city directory, if you want to send comments to her on that or whatever, she can make a special note to check those items during the process.
And that's hopefully what this process is for, so that we get informed and maybe can change our plans, the council can get information and hold us accountable to that. Sir, you're going very big.
I know you've researched this already, but what are the regulations regarding the proximity of two cannabis shops near each other in the same street in Washington?
So there is a,
They're required to be half a mile apart from each other.
So what are they?
The garden
9/10.
remedies to this, it's 0.9 of a mile, so it's almost 1 mile.
So you make it by how much?
No, it's well over,
Almost double.
it's almost double the amount that
And the
it's,
second question, what's your policy about Lyft and Uber?
in terms of wow.
When your customers come, from a second-hand source, the cannabis shop in Brookline is double parking all the time in front of their store. I'm just concerned that it might replicate itself with Uber and Lyft.
Well, I cannot imagine on Washington Street with two lanes of traffic going in opposite directions that anyone, you literally would have to stop in a travel lane to double park. That's part of the reason that the parking lot is so important, that people can get in. Now, that said, as with anything else, customers that are not behaving the way our customers should behave are gonna be held accountable. You don't get that when you go to the Whole Foods parking lot. You don't get that from Trader Joe's or a liquor store.
Lyft accountable. I mean, Lyft is a company, not the driver. I mean.
Yes, but if the driver double parks to let the person out on Washington Street, first of all, a rear ending is going, the likes of which that person has never experienced is going to happen because it's on Washington Street. But the person who's responsible is the customer. You shouldn't have gotten out, and the car shouldn't have been double parked. It's that simple. You hold responsible the person you can hold responsible. Taxi drivers double park, Lyft drivers double park, Uber double parks. What is astounding to me is that we're being asked to be held accountable for bad behavior of other companies that exhibit that bad behavior in front of retail everywhere. We can't.
Just a quick question, an esoteric question. Have you worked with the planners of the city of Newton regarding a Washington Street vision that we have from West Newton Square all the way to Craft Street?
Nobody cares.
They are aware of what is desired on Washington Street. We actually considered that when we first did it. I will tell you honestly, from my perspective, a Washington Street entrance and exit is less safe than Cross Street. That's less safe does not mean less traffic. I understand that those two things don't. I get it. Hold on.
But you talk all the time. Let me speak.
Because it's our community meeting and we rented the hall. That's why. That's why.
And this is our.
We're not.
If the traffic study's been done, do you guys know the traffic going through the side streets?
The woman next to her next, woman up front, and then this woman in gray, and this woman here.
This wasn't my question. When you say you don't think it's fair that you be held responsible for Uber and Lyft, you're what attracts them to the location. And if you haven't been on Beacon Street in Boston and seen double parking, you haven't lived. So if you don't expect there to be double parking, that's crazy. Even the airport has now set up spots where Uber and Lyft drop off and pick up. You could arrange for that if you really cared about that.
That's why we have parking attendants there.
Not parking attendants there. Uber and Lyft is a different story when people are coming in their own cars.
We don't even have an idea of how many of our patrons are going to be first, please let me finish. Utilizing Uber and Lyft. And when I said what I said about being held responsible for it, we're in an environment in this meeting where everyone is sort of standing up and saying, well, what about this and what about that and what about this and what are you going to do to stop this from happening? All I am suggesting to you is that every retail business has its challenges. No one is able to prevent every single thing that happens. If it becomes an issue of double parking, we will absolutely address it. But having been on Washington Street, I have never seen a car double parked in front of any business on Washington Street. Side streets, perhaps, but not. I just haven't seen it.
I agree with you there. I have never seen that because I've never seen a business where people come and go every 15 minutes. But that's besides.
You don't think that people come and go from places like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods?
15 minutes.
Oh, I certainly have. Dunkin' Donuts?
No, I can add one thing. When the trigger
No, I'm sorry.
Anyway, may I get
One
to my
thing.
question?
No.
May I get to my question?
Sure.
I'm changing gears. I feel very sorry for the people who live anywhere near this from the traffic perspective. I don't happen to live right on top of it, but I do live in the Newtonville area. So my question is here, you elaborated nicely on a pledge and to your community responsibility. Now we have to rely on you to enforce it. Will you write into that pledge third-party beneficiary rights to the neighbors and to the city, so that if you don't happen to do what you said today you would do, which isn't recorded anywhere in particular, of banning people from your establishments, and I only really care about this one, that the city can come in and enforce, or the abutters can come and enforce if you don't do what you told us today. And can I just add to that despite what Ms. Franz said, I happen to work in regulated industries for 42 years, and I happen to consider the Cannabis Control Commission's regulations a drop kick to do end runs around with respect to interlocking ownership, nothing compared to what Medicare provides for interlocking ownership. It's, to me, the regulations of 100-page length is kind of a joke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of a joke, and certainly doesn't address any of this. It wasn't your company, but down in towards the Cape, you're not supposed to advertise. People put up billboards for their cannabis definition. So I don't feel particularly comfortable that the Cannabis Control Commission exactly knows what they're doing. And I happen to think lawyers can run circles around it in a heartbeat. Maybe not the seed to seed, but everything else gives me no comfort whatsoever. And the traffic situation is going to be, I predict, a nightmare with people coming and going every 15 minutes. And I do not believe a business that is capitalized at $450 million that decides to pledge $2,500 to charities in
What business is that? That's capitalized at $450 million.
Because that's 0.0005% that you decided to commit to charities in Newton. It's almost insulting rather than helpful.
Ma'am, we did not, we didn't write the host community agreement. We agreed to what the city put in there.
You're exactly right, and the city is feeling incredibly lax.
Well, and I would suggest that you address that to the city. How you feel about the cannabis control regulations?
In your shoes, I would do the same thing. Because don't ask, don't get. I have no problem with your position.
Ma'am in the room.
You're doing what's required of you.
And then ma'am, you're next, and this woman in the second row. Ma'am.
Hi, my name is Dr. Perkins. I'm the parent of a rising high schooler and middle schooler. My concern is that this location is on the walking paths of our award-winning high school and middle school.
Right.
We will have kids going past them night and day. They will be in danger from the traffic.
Right.
They will be in danger from the products. I just learned it's illegal to sell gummy bears in Massachusetts, but certainly not brownies and cookies, which are far more appealing to youngsters than beer. I am also concerned about, while people may not be allowed to use on your facilities, if we have a recreational marijuana shop on Washington Street here and a recreational marijuana shop on Washington Street here, and Newtonville with its lovely outdoor spaces in the middle, where is everybody going to smoke? I've been to Berkeley, I've been to Denver, I know what it's like. You can smell it everywhere. And what is going to be done to prevent that?
Well, okay, so please don't do that. Ma'am, what you said we hear a lot. The reality of it is that children will not know what they're walking past. People are not coming out of a retail, you can look this up. You can look up other retail cannabis spots. You do not see people walking out and smoking. You do not see people walking out and waving what they just bought so everybody knows that it's a cannabis store. People always say, what will happen when children walk by? And let me finish. The practical reality is, and I know a lot of parents don't want to know about this, kids in middle school, if you go to Newton North, Newton South, whatever the high school is, any child you talk to can tell you exactly how to get cannabis and any other drug you want on school grounds right now. I know it's not, parents don't like the idea that their kids do know about this, but they do know about this. The difference is they don't have access to what is inside our stores. And at the price point, because the average sale is between $75 to $100, no one is giving away what they buy inside to children, right? Because you pay a lot more for it, unlike a lot of the stuff that is being bought illegally and continues to be bought in great volume. 70% of the cannabis consumption in the state of Massachusetts last year was bought on the illegal market, not the legal market.
Okay, so you're just telling me you're making about $10,000 a day at your store.
I said that's the average purchase. I didn't say in Massachusetts or in our store. That is what the average purchase
But you
is
just
when you
said
look.
someone coming out of my store isn't gonna give their kid the $100 of pot, and you also said you have appointments every 15 minutes and 12 employees working at all times. So
talking
you are
about
bringing
travel.
in
Stop.
a lot of money every day. Given how much money you are bringing in and the transportation issues, if you cannot find a spot that is perhaps safer for the community in terms of the access to the children, maybe you could buy a distant parking lot and a van. And all of your clients have to park there. There is no parking on site at all. People are not allowed to drive, or do not allow parking on site for people, or very limited parking. Do not allow people to drive whatsoever, and have a free van from a location 1 or 2 miles away. It seems like, given the amount of money you will be making, that would not be a huge sacrifice.
I understand that that's the point that you are making. You have yet to say to me and show me any evidence that the presence of this cannabis retail will be deleterious to children. You have speculated that children might be in some sort of nebulous danger simply by walking past it. The same children that walk past restaurants and bars that serve drinks and liquor stores every single day in the company of their parents and alone, and no one is concerned about that. And people who actively drink around those areas. You're suggesting that we do something. Go to a different location, buy a parking lot, buy a van, to address a concern about children that you have yet to articulate any basis for having. What is it that tell me what you know has happened to children who have walked by a cannabis retail that would support the suggestion you just made?
I will tell you what is happening in communities where it is legal and easily accessible. I have a
What community? Please be specific.
Berkeley, California.
You cannot compare that to Massachusetts.
Why?
Because California, Colorado, and Oregon were among the first 3 states that made it legal. It literally was the Wild West. Some of it is a regional sensibility. So it was wide open. They had virtually no regulations. As legalization has moved east, and particularly when you get to the New England states and a state like Massachusetts, all of that has gotten tightened up. You cannot compare what goes on in Berkeley, California to what will be going on in Massachusetts. They are really apples and oranges.
And I hope it doesn't get to that point, but the use of cannabis is so common on the college campus at this world-renowned school that if someone leaves out food that they have cooked, they have to label whether or not it has cannabis in it, because it might, even if it's macaroni and cheese.
But my question to you again is, what is it that you know that has happened, that has a reasonable chance of happening? Because this isn't anywhere near a college or a university.
Yes, if you're a middle school or high school.
But a college or university, the kids that go to colleges and universities are over 21 and can purchase it. There are no children that are going to be able to purchase. I understand that. I understand how you feel, but you're comparing apples to oranges.
That all the kids. First, you're saying they don't know what's sold in a marijuana store. Then the next sentence you said but they know how to get pot illegally in their middle school.
I didn't say they don't know what's sold in a marijuana store. I said there's nothing. This is an innocuous site. There is nothing about this site that draws people to it. Whether a child knows what's in a liquor store, but if they walk in and they're clearly underage, they don't get served in a liquor store.
Right, but so when they don't know what's in the site, so we were driving on home from the pediatrician's office, and my kids were like, "Oh, what's that big crowd?" And it was the crowd outside of the Brookline store. Exactly. It is a huge 100 people.
There will be no queuing at this store. That's why we said we would do by appointment only. The problem in the Brookline store, if you drive by it, they have no parking whatsoever, and they are on a main street. Those are the things we try to ameliorate when we pick our site. So we picked a standalone building, and we picked one with parking. And we're going to have parking attendants. So all of the things that you raise, it's not that they're not things that we thought of. They're things that we thought of and that we try to mitigate. What I can't mitigate is the speculation that terrible things are going to happen and that I should be proactively trying to prevent something that has not yet happened and has a very low likelihood of happening.
So then this is my last question, I promise. So then I think her idea was wonderful, that you said, tell me, a few minutes ago, you said, tell me what I can do for this community. I want to do the right thing. I'm starting a charitable foundation, and you're making tons of money every day. So I think giving a legally binding promise to the community is not too much to ask.
Well, my problem, I started to we moved on, but I wanted to address the point that you made, ma'am. Whether or not we can assign enforcement rights to neighbors.
Sure you can.
No, we cannot do that.
Yes, you can. You can make them third-party beneficiaries of your pledge.
No, no.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I'm telling you,
And why
no.
do you say
We
no?
would not,
Why do
we
you say
would not, and we
legally
would
cannot?
not do that. We
Why
are,
why do you say you cannot include a third-party beneficiary clause in the contract?
because I am, as the CEO of Ascend, am not going to assign enforcement rights to various members of the community. Law enforcement has the authority to do that. We have the authority to enforce things on our property and to respond to complaints.
So just to be clear, what you're saying is you will not that you cannot, but you will not.
I am not sure that you say we can. I would have to look that up. I am saying also, though, that we would not do that. I would no
That's
more.
fine. If you say you will not, just say that.
I did just say that we will not. I said I also think that we cannot. I have never heard of a third, I know you can have a third-party beneficiary contract, I'm a lawyer. I have never heard of assigning enforcement rights of a company policy to people who do not work for that company, are not owners of that property, who live in and around that. I have never heard of that in my life, but I'm telling you, I would be disinclined to agree to something that extreme.
Beneficiary is always a third-party beneficiary.
I understand what it is,
I
ma'am.
think we agree to disagree on that. It's 9 o'clock, I want to get the people already identified questions, ma'am, and then 2 more. You, ma'am, I'm sorry, you were, and there was one more over here, ma'am, you pointed
He's just
somewhere?
getting the last few.
Gentlemen,
quickly,
okay, so
when-
that's you'll be our last question.
When did you actually buy the property? Is it in the last month? Because on the assessor's database, it's still the previous owner.
Oh, I don't know exactly what day it closed, I can certainly
But you
find
do
out
own
for
it?
you. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been wondering, there's the 5,000 square foot limit on these facilities. You have 3,000 extra feet. How do we know that the 3,000 extra feet would not be used for storage or in some other way for the business? For example, you might want to use it for those bicycle lockers or something like that.
Well, we do have the option of using it for storage. Storage is considered basically dead space. We could store anything in there. You could put old desks or something in there. What we were trying to assure the community is that it is not going to be used for a cannabis use or an inappropriate retail use. We've gotten suggestions from people that I'm not going to say it, because if I say it, we'll be here for another hour, which we have turned down, by the way. We don't intend to use it for anything. We simply wanted the 5,000 square feet for the cannabis retail. Beyond assuring you that we're not going to use it for anything else, I'm not sure how else I can, but we're not.
This may be a
I
question.
can actually speak a little to that. I would not be surprised if that was a condition of the special permit.
Yeah,
The
that would be fine with us.
premises will be limited to the 5,000.
Absolutely empty, because it seems like if the intent was to limit the size of cannabis facilities to 5,000 square feet,
Exactly.
letting something that's not directly cannabis related, but that contributes to your ability to do business, like employee locker rooms or
Oh,
whatever.
that wouldn't be allowed no matter
Yeah.
what. That would
Yeah.
fall within that would
Yeah.
be considered a cannabis use, so it would be violative of the
Right.
5,000 square foot.
But on the other hand, from a fiscal perspective, I'd hate to see 3,000 square feet like dead space. Could it be leased to a completely unrelated, low-impact business,
It could be, but that would have an impact on parking, because whoever's there is likely going to want some of the parking.
I'm
and then-
thinking like, I think that our city clerk is looking for a storage space for city archives or something like that, where a nice secure building would be a space that would get very little
Football equipment,
pushback.
CYO equipment,
Listen, I gotta tell you, I don't have any problem with, as long as the city is fine with it, and as long as it is separately, it doesn't run afoul of the regulation, we don't have to sort of share a parking space with somebody. If it's just, as you say, absolute storage, somebody might be coming there like once a quarter or something like that to check up on things or to deliver things. I don't have an objection to that. I mean, I really don't. I know it can't be used for cannabis, anything, and
Okay.
people have made, and
Your
retail
employees or,
tends not to want to be close to a cannabis business because they have some of the same feelings around cannabis that a lot of other people have. So we usually don't even offer that. We just, but if somebody comes up with a good use for it, I've talked with boards of health about using it as an educational space. You do come down to if people need to park in and around there, which creates a problem for the neighbors. But I have had those conversations, so if somebody comes up with a good idea that doesn't have an impact on parking, doesn't adversely affect the neighbors, and is a good use for either a municipal or a nonprofit, I'm happy to do that.
Being in the second row.
Yes, hi, thank you for answering my question. So we, the neighbors, have a problem here with traffic. We all have an issue with traffic on our streets. Where are your traffic studies? Have you conducted traffic studies here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've done a preliminary study, and that we use to handle prior presentations to the city. We will be submitting a more in-depth study at the time of our permit application.
So we all have a problem with that exit on Cross Street. We all have a problem with parking, all of us. Your store, whatever business this is, it doesn't matter. You're part of a community where it's a very active community. Kids walk, it's a walkable town. We all have a problem, we're all affected, and we're gonna be affected by it for years to come. So how are you gonna mitigate the parking, the traffic? We wanna know how you're gonna do that.
There's a lot of children on those streets
So-
playing on the streets.
So yeah, this is a lot of this is going to be retread, but we are maximizing the number of parking spaces on the site, while also balancing good landscaping practices. One thing that we're doing that I mentioned, we're making that driveway onto Washington Street. We're proposing that be a little bit more narrow, less crossing distance for somebody walking on the sidewalk. We're absolutely doing everything we can with this site, with the constraints that we have to work with, to make it as safe as possible and provide as much on-site parking as possible.
Because I wanna give you an example. Trader Joe's has a lot of traffic. Dunkin' Donuts is a disaster. This is gonna bring a lot of traffic in a street that's already, there's more construction down the road. It's just all impacting a neighborhood here with, it's just a walkable town.
Okay, ma'am in the back.
So, you said earlier that all your employees are going to be parking off-site. So we're talking, if you have 12 to 15 people, maybe one will take public transportation, one will maybe ride their bike. So we're talking 10 to 12 cars. So that may be on Cross Street or Washington Street. Is that where they're going to be?
Well, I think it's sort of a speculation to say that maybe one or two, because there's a reason that we focus on hiring local. We've actually hired people for sites who can walk. I mean, like they live close enough that they can walk and they want to walk. So we do pay attention to that. So I'm not sure that I agree necessarily that it'll only be one or two. But there is parking on Washington Street, right? There's actually plenty of room. It doesn't impinge on the 2 lanes of traffic going this way. So it's on the other side. Yeah, it's not right there. You can, it is on both sides, but there's a lot of it on this side.
Well, that's one of the big
May I add to this?
What? No. Ma'am, are you finished?
Yeah, I mean, Washington Street, though, you should take a look. It's supposedly going to get redesigned with 1 lane in
Right.
each direction and stuff.
Right.
Yes.
Sir?
Hold on for a second, because Bruno had his hand, actually, you did have his hand. Did you have your hand up like a while ago?
She just said what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay, all right.
This was gonna get redesigned, so it's only gonna be 1 lane versus 2.
But I think you'll still have the area for parking, right?
We'll see.
No, I have a feeling that they're gonna keep that.
It's gonna become a park.
Even with the traffic light and or crossing signal?
It's gonna become a park.
Just a second, Andrea, what do you know about that?
We'll be part of that process.
Right, so we'll.
What do you know about it?
For this particular strip, I don't remember whether there's parking on both sides, but I think it's presumptuous. The soup areas are assumed they're not until we see the final redesign.
The latest plan does have parking on both sides of Washington Street, but that's why I'm here, because we need that parking. It isn't as though it's just available to you.
Sir, to close it out?
First, I'd like to say I remember when you were elected sheriff. And I wondered how successful you're going to be, because you had great challenges before you. I'm pleased to know that you have had the successes that you've had.
Thank you.
I think you're in a unique position here in that you had a lot of public experience protecting and defending the public. And your allegiance now is switched to your corporate position. But from my experience, I know that it's possible to bring in our experience in protecting and dealing with the public into the corporate boardroom and try and provide some of the things that the people here have been talking about. And I would ask you to keep that in mind as you go through this process. Number two, the city has, in the past, the city of Newton has in the past, been named as a party in interest to enforce agreements of policy that, and it's as part of a special permit. And I haven't done any research on the legal aspects of it, I just know that we've done it. And I think it's something that you might be able to look into, because it is a problem that you come in and you have your commitments, but in 4 years or 10 years, people change, and all of a sudden no one is protecting the promised regulations. And the city has an interest to go and do the enforcement. And I agree, not the neighbors or the individual people, but the city itself could bring that. And I recommend that too. I also, with respect to the extra space that you have, I think Julia's idea of bringing in, allowing maybe some municipal use or something, tearing it down would be, and creating extra parking would be a good plan,
or an entrance on Washington Street and an exit, or an entrance.
Or used for some sort of circulation method. My thought was that you might provide a space for shared office space for Newton nonprofits, that they all need a little place for the desk, and they have big places in Boston, I'm sure you're aware of them. And we might be able to do something like that for the lower scale businesses in the community. One of the problems we are facing is that as Washington Street gets changed, we're going to drive out the moderate and middle class people. We're going to have big business and expensive apartments and a smattering of low income units. So there are many of us that are concerned and want to protect we're almost anti-gentrification. So there were some issues that I had. Are you going to share we all gave you our email addresses. Are you going to create some sort of link that we can communicate with you and you can communicate with us with those addresses? Or can we all get a copy?
Communicate with me personally so that my inbox is flooded.
Yeah, if we can do that, it's going to take 5 hours to just email and
yeah,
that will work.
Oh, yeah, I have a feeling that would, while I am certain that any communication that you sent me would be respectful and thoughtful, I am not as convinced that it would be that generally, nor would I have any control over where it gets shared.
But see, the people here would like to be able to communicate with each other. And would you share those addresses? Do you have a website or something that we can?
Would I give all of the people here the addresses of all of the other people who are here?
Yeah.
I don't think we should do that. People didn't sign up to have their email addresses published to everyone else who showed up at the community meeting.
So maybe if there's anyone who wants to, you can sign up your own. I think there's a listserv now that's up and running.
Part of the reason that we do it is because we have to report to the CCC that people showed up to the community meeting, and that we had a head count of people, and that they were real people, we're not making it up, and that we actually had the community meeting, because they don't send a representative to watch.
Which, do we have the sign-in sheet?
My last question, or my last comment is, it almost seems to me like this is going to be a superstore.
It is not.
No, I'm just telling you, I know I live halfway between Garden Remedies and your site, so I can get there. It's unfortunate that I don't use it, so it doesn't do me any good, but I can get to either place. If it's going to be a superstore, you're going to have to bring in a customer base outside of the local community. So at some point, we're going to ask about your advertising program, and are you outreaching to Waltham and
There's no
Needham?
advertising.
No, okay.
But the location is your advertisement. Everybody on the plaque sees your building, everybody sees the sign. From all over the state, they're gonna be taking both exits, and that's why you need, why didn't you have a
The
2,000
sign
square foot
is
space?
for-
Because you wanted to have higher volume, and that's why you chose that location, so everybody.
I'm not gonna respond to additional accusations by you that are as baseless as the one in the first question that you asked. We are abiding by the regulations, the sign, every business. We are a business. We are entitled to have the name of our business on the front of the building. Any other signage is supposed to be for wayfinding only, and we're not even doing that. You cannot, under the regulations, advertise your business anywhere in Massachusetts unless you can assure the Cannabis Control Commission that 85% of the people who see that advertisement are over the age of 21. We don't do any advertising, but it would make no sense for us to have an actual business that doesn't have the name of the business on front of it, just like every other retail business. And to that point, it goes to this sort of unreasonableness of what people are saying to us, about the way that we have to operate, and it goes to their feelings about cannabis or about traffic and parking, not about the fact that this is a retail business. So no, we're not advertising, we are putting the name of our business on the front of our business the way every other business does. So to your point, that was the answer to your question as well, is that we do not advertise.
And would you be willing to consider limiting your rights of ownership in the building by agreeing not to build a building that exceeds the as-of-right allowance on that site? What we're faced with is people that are going to start building 10-story buildings down Washington Street. There's a lot of opposition to that. And as part of your agreement to get this project, would you agree not to tear the building down and, as you said earlier, have apartments above and your stores below? I don't want you to answer that tonight. I'd like you to think about it.
I kind of do want to answer it tonight.
I know.
Because no matter what we say, no one believes us. If someone were to buy this from us, they would be in the day one position that we were in when we started seeking the permit. Somebody that, even if the business were to be sold somehow, whoever buys it is still accountable to the city council, is still accountable to this. They don't inherit any of the things that we have, including a host community agreement. They start from square one seeking a permit.
I don't want to give away the store, but the present city council is not. They don't think half the time.
Exactly. All right, on that note.
You know she's in the room, right? You know she's sitting right there. But we don't have an interest, and the reason we chose the site is because it doesn't need, and we don't want anything else. It's not a superstore. I know 5,000 square feet may seem like a big place to you. It is not in terms of other businesses in the area. And there are cannabis operations that are 16,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, 7,000 square feet. We don't intend it to be a super stop and shop. It is a cannabis retail. We don't need to build up. We don't need to build out. We are happy with the footprint as it is. It meets the Newton regulations. If we can find something good to do with that 3,000 square feet that doesn't impinge on parking, we will do that. I don't have any other way to say this. And if anybody came behind us and tried to do something different, they would have to make their case about why that was an appropriate use, and they'd have to make it in front of you and everybody else. That's the best answer I can give you.
So we're about a half hour over where we were hoping to be. Thank everybody for coming out.
Can I just suggest
You know what,
that
so if you want to come up afterwards, have a conversation,
the
that'd be great.
presentation be put on the city website? They have Heiser's project.
It's not finalized, so we don't put it out publicly.
Call it draft.
But people, you're very welcome. I appreciate you coming. People take what we anything that's not finalized.
Well, stamp that draft over every page.
You know it doesn't matter. There's a hard line to walk between
Yeah, but call anyone who wasn't here tonight to see that information. How would anyone who wasn't here tonight see that Well, we're on draft 4 of the Washington State Plan, and draft 1, 2, 3, and 4 are on the city website.
That's a municipal plan for municipal space. This is a private company, private space. And there's a fundamental difference in privacy and access. So I think that's really important. You're planning, this is not a place
So I guess the thing is, once you apply for the special permit, then what you apply for would go onto the city website the way any special permit application. No, but normally for a special permit.
There's one thing I have to tell you. One thing I have to tell you.
Special permit application. I mean, they'll get filed permits. They're not final until ready to prove, but they're on. This version is on the city website. If they change it, the next version is on the city website. All in a special permit. By the address, version 1, version 2, version 3. I realize it's not.